Most people have never heard about it, but right outside of a major Canadian city, one of the world's strangest and best-kept secrets lies buried, hidden deep underground. Placed there by a single man with a unique vision, his epic project has inspired countless people and angered many others, including local authorities. Who is this man, and what is this project that he's dedicated his life to? Before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe, and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. Since the early 80s, Bruce Beach has been secretly buying school buses and burying them underground in an undisclosed location somewhere in rural Canada. His strange project has drawn criticism, praise, and the intervention of law enforcement. And while it is not very well known, those who have heard of it can't help but have a strong opinion about it, one way or another. Recently, Beach has decided to share his work with the world, as well as his reasons for working on it for so long. So, what is Bruce Beach's secret, and why is it so polarizing? Bruce Beach was born in Kansas in 1934. Having lived through the horrors of the Vietnam War and the tensions of the Cold War, Bruce and his wife decided to move to Canada in order to live in a safer environment. They felt that Canada's seclusion would allow them a higher degree of safety, but moving to the Great White North wasn't enough. In the late 70s, Beach was bothered by the rising threat of nuclear war between Russia and the States, and rather than sit around and wait for the bombs to fall, decided to do something about it. His decision would end up turning into a project he named Arc 2, and which would capture the imaginations of countless like-minded individuals when he finally revealed it to the world. In the early 1970s, Beach moved to his wife's hometown, the Canadian village of Hornings Mills. Approximately a 90-minute drive from Toronto, Hornings Mills is isolated, scenic, and most importantly, safe. Standing smack dab in the middle of the Great Lakes, it wasn't just a beautiful location, it was also perfect for Bruce's plans, and by 1980 he had already sketched out an elaborate blueprint for what would prove to be one of the most interesting and outlandish projects the Canadian province of Ontario had ever seen. Starting in 1980, Bruce Beach began acquiring old-school buses. Buying them for approximately $300 apiece, Bruce wasn't interested in their engines or their mobility, but rather in their solid, sage structures. Slowly accumulating a collection of 42 buses and storing them in a tightly packed formation in an old lot near his home, by 1985, Bruce was ready for the next step of his plan. Bruce Beach had some very specific plans for his Hornings Mills project, and he chose to use school buses because they boasted several features which make them perfect for his plans, and infinitely preferable to any other similar vehicle. First, school buses had roomy, open floor plans, but more importantly, school buses are required, by law, to have their roofs reinforced with steel beams. This makes them safer for their child passengers in case they end up in an accident, but also allows them to carry much larger weights on their roofs. Weight that could result from dirt being piled on top of them when they're buried underground. After Bruce finished setting up the school buses in a tight formation in a large swath of his 12.5-acre property, he began the slow, difficult process of cutting their chassis and turning them into a massive, interconnected structure of winding corridors, rooms, storage spaces, and bulkheads. But Bruce didn't do it alone. As he began construction, a small army of like-minded volunteers began to show up, and over the next few years would help complete the construction of the complex. After several years of slow-paced but deliberate and thoughtful work, Bruce's bus-building complex was complete, and he was ready to take the next step. Making sure the bus's chassis were airtight, he began pouring concrete over the structure, encasing it forever in the thick, resilient substance. After the concrete had set and dried, Bruce proceeded to cover the construction with an additional 14 feet of dirt. When he was done, the entire underground complex was completely invisible to outside observers and safe under a thick layer of concrete and earth. Finally, the initial construction of Bruce's vision was complete. He had built 10,000 square feet of a fortified bunker capable of withstanding a nuclear blast and of housing over 500 people within its underground walls. Naming it Arc 2, this mega complex made of school buses and concrete is one of the largest underground structures in North America, a huge accomplishment on any scale. But building it, it turned out, was only half the battle. You may think that a complex as large as Arc 2, made out of salvaged materials and old school buses, encased under tons of concrete and dirt, and built by a single untrained man, might sound a little unsafe from a structural standpoint. And if it was anyone else other than Bruce Beach building this monstrous complex, you'd probably be right. But Bruce isn't like anyone else. Serious about his passion project, Bruce consulted with the same engineer who designed and constructed Toronto's subway system, who, after going over Bruce's plans and making a few key changes, approved the structure as structurally sound. Describing the construction of Arc 2 as a feat carried out by Bruce Beach alone would be false. It's true that his single-minded determination played a huge role in making the underground fort a reality, but he wouldn't have been able to pull it off without the help of friends and volunteers. As the project progressed, at least 50 people from Hornings Mills, as well as members of the survivalist community, came together to take part in the planning and hard labor required to create the structure. But why would any well-balanced individual choose to take part in what seems like an insane project? One motivation for people to pitch in and work with Bruce on Arc 2, other than the sheer awesomeness of getting to say that they got to help build an underground nuclear bunker, is the simple fact that Bruce has guaranteed a spot in his massive shelter for anyone who is willing to help in its construction and maintenance. Volunteers are invited to spend a few weekends a year working around the structure, performing renovations and basic maintenance, and in return, to assure their safety in case disaster ever strikes, a situation which Bruce is quite certain will happen sooner rather than later. Getting inside Arc 2 isn't as simple as opening a door and walking inside. First, you must be granted access ahead of time, but even if you have been granted access, entering the bunker is an ordeal. You must enter through a rusty old door, the only part of the complex visible from above ground, which houses behind it a power generator, and the entrance to the underground labyrinth. Visitors, or future vault dwellers, then descend down 14 feet of earth before they reach the actual underground living area, which houses a staggering array of amazing features. Making Arc 2 safe for people fleeing a disaster doesn't just mean making the bunker safe from a nuclear blast. Once the shelter is occupied at full capacity, one of the biggest dangers its occupants will face won't necessarily be from above, but rather from inside. Should anyone carrying a virulent or infectious sickness enter the tightly packed space, the consequences could be disastrous. But how do you screen for sickness? Some healthy-looking individuals could be incubating a dangerous disease, and letting them into the shelter could seal the fate of hundreds of other survivors. To avoid contamination, Bruce had set up a special decontamination chamber at the entrance to the complex. Equipped with a stainless steel double sink, a shower, and a bathtub for children and disabled individuals, and a food decontamination area. The screening chamber is meant to minimize any danger of contamination and illness by any of the individuals seeking shelter in Arc 2. But this prudent facility is only one of many specialized chambers in the underground maze. In order to survive, the inhabitants of Arc 2 will need more than just shelter from fallout and radiation. To maintain any semblance of normal life in the underground environment, the residents of Arc 2 will need to have access to fresh water, plumbing, and electricity. Luckily, Bruce had thought of everything. Arc 2 boasts an elaborate plumbing system, which runs throughout the complex and into an industrial septic tank, as well as access to a private well full of potable drinking water. The shelter is also equipped with several diesel generators, and enough fuel to keep them running continuously for 3 months before there's a need to restock. Impressive, but what do other survivalists think? Bruce Beach is part of an international community of people who like to call themselves preppers. Preppers believe that a catastrophic disaster of one kind or another is inevitable and likely, and that in times of need, relying on government infrastructure may not be possible. Instead, they like to prep for these events themselves, making sure they're equipped to deal with these situations as individuals and small communities to the best of their ability. But while many preppers have stocks of emergency rations and water, Bruce's Ark 2 project is as unique and mind-blowing to them as it is to anyone else. Of course, one of the most basic needs Ark 2 needs to answer is that of food. Even if everyone inside is healthy, safe, and clean without food to sustain the shelter's survivors, they wouldn't be able to last long before they'd have to brave the hostile outdoors once more. Luckily, Bruce has thought of everything. The Ark boasts 2 industrial kitchens, one primarily for cooking, while the other mostly for washing dishes. Maintaining food supplies for 500 people in an underground shelter is a significant challenge. Bruce Beach admitted that tons of food had to be discarded over the years. Even preserved items like canned beans required periodic replacement. Ark 2 is more than just a survival shelter. It includes classrooms, a library, a radio center, an infirmary, and even a mortuary. Bruce designed it to meet a wide range of needs, ensuring those inside would be comfortable. However, it's far from a luxury retreat. Due to space constraints, sleeping quarters are divided into men's and women's sections, separating families. Bruce justified this arrangement as necessary to maximize capacity. Bruce considered the children's well-being by including classrooms, a nursery, and a play area. Chess sets were also provided, as he valued their educational benefits. The shelter features an advanced radio system, capable of reaching both Canada and the U.S., allowing survivors to communicate with the outside world. Preppers believe in preparing for impending catastrophe through stockpiling resources and training. Though Bruce was featured on Doomsday Preppers, he did not identify as one, as he saw his efforts as altruistic rather than self-serving. Bruce felt that many preppers prioritized personal survival over community welfare. He saw Ark 2 as a humanitarian project designed to help others in times of crisis. Despite Bruce's intentions, authorities repeatedly attempted to shut Ark 2 down. The Ontario government labeled it a public hazard, spending substantial funds in efforts to close it. His lack of permits further fueled their opposition. The fire department deemed Ark 2 a fire hazard and shut it down multiple times. Even when Bruce hosted gatherings, officials intervened, but he believed their actions were baseless distractions. Bruce, a former U.S. Air Force radio operator and computer science teacher, predicted nuclear war would begin with Pakistan bombing India. His estimated timeline for global catastrophe constantly shifted, reflecting his deep concerns. Bruce founded Safe America for Everyone, promoting inclusivity regardless of race, politics, or religion. His website welcomed anyone willing to join before disaster struck. Bruce believed humanity had a bright future, but was pessimistic about the immediate outlook. He saw disasters as opportunities to rebuild a better society and urged others to prepare. Bruce Beach passed away in 2021 at age 87. His wife and 5 children now ponder the future of his mission. Meanwhile, his long-running Prepper newsletter, read by 2,000 people, continues under the leadership of Antonia Lau.